All right, everybody. I've retooled the weekly review type of episode. I hope that this works for you. I'm also trying to make sure that I'm centered in the camera, which I don't think that I am, but who cares? I'm tired. We're going to get this thing going. Welcome to Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. I'm Dan Vespris. You can and should follow me on Twitter at Dan Vespris, Old Man Squad on Blue Sky, Old Man Squad Fantasy over on Instagram as we get settled in. This is the playoff Week 1 review show. I think that's big enough. You guys can see that, right? A new trimmed down format for the silly season. So instead of the, 40, 50, 60 names, this will be more like 15 to 20, and we can spend maybe a little bit more time on each one of them. That's the ultimate goal here. Please, as you're settling in, hit that subscribe button. This is how we're going to continue to grow Old Man Squad. Hit the like button as well if you're watching on YouTube. And if you're listening after the fact, those 5-star reviews on Apple and Spotify definitely go a long way towards helping us grow. We're going to begin with the ads. That's everybody's favorite part. And there's sort of a different story on each one of these guys. I didn't separate them into injury replacements because we're 5 weeks from the end of the season. So, what is the difference between an injury replacement and a rest of season guy right now? It might be nothing. Think of it from this perspective. Think of it from a percentages game. If someone like, looking at the names on this board, take, for example, Klay Thompson or Naji Marshall. Could PJ Washington come back? Maybe. Might Caleb Martin ramp up in minutes? Maybe. Anybody else? Could Gafford or Derek Lively come back? Maybe. But we don't know. Let's say, hypothetically, PJ Washington plays again in 2 weeks. That's 40% of the season that he's not playing. So, okay, would Naji Marshall then not be a rest of season play? I guess, but if someone told you at the beginning of the year that you could get a really good play for 40% of the season, you kind of have to approach it the same way now with the shortened version. Same story for Keon Ellis. I don't know when Malik Monk's coming back. Might be tomorrow. What about Tre Jones in Chicago? We know when Lonzo's coming back. Might be today. I don't know. Same story for Zach Collins and Vooch. Let's talk about these guys. So Russell Westbrook is the first name on the list. These are in no particular order. This is just how I was looking through the box scores to make sure that I didn't miss any names. Aaron Gordon back out again for the Nuggets in their last ball game. He left early with calf tightness. Didn't even make it through. I think he left in the first quarter, and they didn't rule him out until like around halftime. He could play in the next ball game. I really don't know. But Gordon's been in and out of the lineup all season long with basically this same type of stuff. And they're trying to take it easy on him, and they want him to be ready for the playoffs. And at the same time, this is sort of like a cursed year for Gordon. He's just not going to be healthy. And every time he goes down, Russ gets a really big bump. Now, admittedly, Russ was not very good in this game against Oklahoma City. That's just the kind of defense that's going to give him incredible fits, very fast, long, tough. There's really not much that Russ can do against a defense like that at this stage of his career, but he had 11 rebounds and 5 assists. He had a block. He's not going to shoot the ball well, but you're looking for those counting stats. You're looking for the points, the boards, the assists, the steals, and I think there should be, and historically, at least this year, historically, maybe not the right word, recent history would suggest in Denver that when one of those starters is out, Russ is a startable fantasy asset until someone comes back and displaces him. Next name on the ads board is Naji Marshall, and this one requires very little explanation because he's been going buck freaking wild since Kyrie Irving went down, and right now it's just sort of getting better every single day for Naji, but at some point that's going to cap out. In his last ball game, Marshall had 34, 9, and 10. Previous game was 29 and 17. His minutes are through the roof. I'm not really sure why, honestly, why you play a guy 40 minutes, but I'm sure he's having a blast right now, putting up career numbers over the last week, averaging close to 30 points a game, averaging more than 10 rebounds, averaging around 4 to 5 assists per game and almost 2 steals. He's doing all the things. And he's making his foul shots, and he's actually hot from the field right now, which is crazy. So this one is like the no-brainer to end all no-brainers. And it could be this could be kind of an indefinite thing for him as well. Like, there's not a guy, I know I use PJ Washington as an example, but there really isn't a guy in Dallas that's on the brink of coming back that's going to derail what Marshall is doing right now. So this one is an ad with probably longer appeal. His teammate Klay Thompson is generally over-rostered, so you're probably not going to be able to pick him up, but just go scan your league. He's available in one league that I'm in, which, like, he's 75% rostered, but he's been pretty terrible this year up until, like, the last week, pretty much. He's been sitting in that 140 to 150 range. That's not terrible, I guess, but it's definitely not a 12-team startable guy this season. But lately, he's been much better. He's getting way more shots, 16 shots a game over the last 2 weeks. Since Kyrie Irving went down, it's even more than that. He's at 17.5 shots per game, only shooting 37%. So if at any point over the next 5 weeks, Klay decides to shoot 45% for a week or two, then he has kind of top 50, top 75 range potential, because you're talking about a 20-point per game scorer and 4+ 3-pointers a night. Not going to do much for you defensively, not going to rebound or pass very much. It's sort of now the more traditional shooting guards fantasy game, but he can do enough in scoring and threes and good free throw percent and just sort of aggregating other stats that he would end up being a 9-cat startable guy. So I think Klay belongs on rosters. Make sure he's not available in any of your leagues. It still surprises me, honestly, that he's not, because there's so much name recognition. But no, you might be in a league where someone's like, I don't really need a bunch of 3-pointers, and that's where he would float out and be available to the masses. Max Christie's probably a tougher one for me to talk you guys into, because he's been about as cold as you could possibly be lately, and so his rank is terrible over the last week, basically since Kyrie went down. He's shooting 4 out of 11 from the field over that stretch. It's about 37%, give or take. 11 points, 4 boards, 2.5 assists, a steal, and 2.3 3-pointers. But again, he's another guy where he's basically just shooting closer to his career mark away from being inside the top 100 over that stretch. He's playing 34 minutes a game. One would argue that the steals probably get a little bit higher. He's, I think, in a little bit of a steals lull right now. He's definitely in a shooting lull, and a lot of his shots are going to come from downtown. So you're now talking about a guy that could jump from 2.3 3-pointers a game to 3. The scoring could jump from 10.5 to like 12 or 13. That's enough to push him into that top 100 range. He's not as exciting, perhaps, as the higher usage guys in Dallas, but he is doing enough, I think, to be rostered, at least in the near term. Kelly Olynyk is the next name on the list, but before we tell you about Kelly, I got to remind you that this show is brought to you by our buddies at BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. Subscribe to our page while I'm telling you about it, with the largest selection of odds on everything from the NBA to college basketball, NHL, UFC, MLB coming down the pike. BetOnline continues to be your number one sports betting source. They've got every 3-pointer and hat trick and cover you with odds, stats, and more on every game, every play, and every win. BetOnline. The game starts here. Kelly Olynyk is maybe playing in back-to-backs now. That's exciting and a new and fun development. He's not going high usage like the Kelly Olynyk of Houston or even down the stretch in Toronto last year, but he just does so many things from a 9-cat perspective. Field goal percent is usually good. Free throw percent is usually good. He hits 3-pointers from a big man spot. He can score a little bit. He rebounds relatively well. He passes well. He gets steals. He gets blocks. There really isn't anything he doesn't do. It's hard to find a guy out there who can be a positive in 9 categories, but Olynyk is not that far away from it. The problem, of course, is that the Pels continue to, in most of their games, still play guys like Zion and CJ McCollum and Trey Murphy, and Murphy probably plays it out at this point. But I don't think, that far away from McCollum getting more than rest days on only back-to-backs. I don't think we're that far away from Zion maybe taking an extra game off here and there, although he did miss a bunch at the beginning of the season. But anything that bumps Olynyk up from 5 to 7 shots to more like 9 or 10, that's a huge, huge boost to him, because that just means the ball's in his hand. That means that the assists are going to be better. All of that stuff, to me, is a very good reason to have Kelly Olynyk on your fantasy basketball team, because it just doesn't take that much for him to post 9-cat value. He's always knocking on the door. Has he been in the last week? Nope. 38% from the field, 6.5 shots a game. That's just not enough. We need more. But it's so close. Keon Ellis is the next name on my ads board, and this is mostly tied to Malik Monk being out. I don't know that Ellis is going to be a play when Monk comes back. We've seen his minutes kind of bounce around a little bit. Certainly with Sabonis out, that gives him a little bit of a better avenue at it, but he's a massive steals and blocks play from the guard spot. He's going to hit 1 to 2 3-pointers a game. He's a pretty good free throw shooter. He's not much of a rebounder or a passing guy is what I was trying to say. Guys, I didn't get much sleep last night, so you pardon me if I trip over my words a few times today, which is a shame because I have 2 very important shows to do on a brand new week. Here we are. He's not a big field goal percent guy, Ellis. So, I mean, yes, more of a specialist appeal kind of dude, but certainly with Malik Monk on the shelf right now, for how long we don't really know, Ellis is a play. As a starter, he's a play. As a bench guy, I think he's more of an upscale steals and blocks streamer. Jabari Smith Jr. looks like he just got kind of a new lease on fantasy life with Amen Thompson being ruled out for a couple of weeks. I'm not a big Jabari Smith Jr. guy in general, but the opportunity is now there for him to get back to playing full starters minutes. I mean, the last game was a blowout, so minutes weren't exactly what you'd expect. But if you look back a couple of ball games as he's settling in here, 37, 28 minutes, so anywhere in the low 30s for him, that's going to be enough. What I wonder with Jabari Smith is what does Freddie VanVleet do to this situation when he comes back? Because it sounds like Fred is actually not that far away from playing. Does that mush Jabari back out of the team's good graces again? Or does Jabari Smith stay in that starting 5 and just not have as many dudes breathing down his neck? Still Tari Eason floating around, but they can carve out enough minutes for Eason from the power forward spot, from the small forward spot, even the shooting guard spot if they really wanted to. Less likely there. The problem on Jabari Smith is he's not a good percentages guy. He's like kind of meh in both of them. So you need enough steals, blocks, threes, points, rebounds to kind of get up and over the hump. That's where I'm not positive we actually get there. Because his game actually, after all of this, isn't translating all that great to fantasy sports. So he's not my favorite on this list, but I think he's going to get a lot of playing time. It might turn out that he's more like an elite streamer, but I don't know. Keep him on your roster. Maybe I should have had him in the very close misses category that we're going to get to here in a minute. Andrew Nembhard is on the list. He's running warm, which helps his case regardless, but also Tyrese Halliburton has been out for the last 2 ball games, and that's going to certainly change what Nembhard is expected to do. He's had 10 and then 12 assists in the 2 games that Halliburton missed, and that's not a coincidence. Andrew's a good steals guy. He's a good assists guy, especially when Halliburton is out. He's a pretty good field goal percent guy for a guard. Doesn't really hit many 3-pointers, doesn't rebound all that much, doesn't score all that much. So with Halliburton out, he's a play because the assists, the steals, the minutes, the scoring, all that stuff is high enough where he should just be rostered everywhere. When Halliburton's back, he's more of an assists, steals, volume streamer, which, by the way, and we'll talk about this on our streaming show, is the case right now. Indiana goes back-to-back tonight and tomorrow. Tre Jones is another name on the list that's kind of been overlooked a little bit in a lot of fantasy leagues. He's still a free agent in a lot of spots. I picked him up in a few, but he's still only 8% rostered despite putting up big numbers for 3 games in a row. And it's tied heavily to Lonzo Ball being out, who we don't know. Lonzo might make his return as soon as tonight. He hasn't been ruled out yet. He's doubtful, so odds are he's not going to be back for this one. And then Chicago's off for a couple of days, so not exactly a great scheduling spot. But at least in terms of, you know, more of the games cap kind of situations, you had a good game today and then off for a few. I think Tre Jones is a really easy yes for today. His teammate Zach Collins is more heavily rostered because he's been picking up for Vooch for now, a week and change. If somehow Collins is still a free agent in your league, definitely make sure he's not anymore. His only bad game since Vooch went down was when he fouled out in 12 minutes against Orlando. Otherwise, he's been outstanding. And the funny thing is, over the last 2 weeks, he's number 40 in 9-cat. That's with that bad game mixed in. You take that out, and he's basically been a second-round pick over that stretch. So Collins is a must-roster guy. Where you run into a little bit of trouble is after today. because we don't know if Vooch might be back after Chicago has a couple days off. They have a bad schedule here coming up with just one game today, and then after that, 2 games the rest of the week. So head-to-head players, you guys kind of have a lot to juggle on the Zach Collins front. Roto leaguers, it's a much easier decision. And then my last name on the ads board is Deuce McBride. Jalen Brunson went down, and McBride looked quite bad, actually, in his one opportunity to get a start. That was against the Clippers. But here's the thing. Yes, at the end of the year, right now, limited sample size is all we have to work off of. So if McBride is not playing well, it's hard to make a really good case for him. But what I can tell you guys is if you go through and look at the numbers, basically look and see when McBride has started basketball games this year, when have his minutes been better? And there really hasn't been a sustained stretch because to Jalen Brunson's credit, prior to this injury, he had been a pillar of health. I'm looking at how many games had Brunson missed even before this one. I think the answer was like less than one hand's worth. Knicks had played 63 games. He missed 1 game prior to this last one that he sat out against the Clippers. So there really wasn't an opportunity for us to see what McBride can do this season when he got opportunities to start. What you can look at is what did he do when his minutes were high? Which, again, didn't happen regularly, but happened every once in a while. And typically when that happens, the shots were up in the teens. Like he had it's February 20th against Chicago. Was this a game? Was this the other game that Brunson said? No. Was somebody out for this ball game? Somebody was out. Josh Hart was out for that ball game. I think it was an overtime game. And McBride took 19 shots. It was 9 for 19. So he's a pretty good steals guy when he plays big minutes. He's going to score and hit 3-pointers, but he's not going to rebound. He's not going to pass all that much. I mean, you might get like 2 to 3 assists per game in full starters minutes. But what you should really be looking for with him is 1 to 1.5 steals. You're hoping for about 2 3-pointers over a full game's worth of work. I need more rest. And not a super diverse fantasy stat set. So you're looking for, I think 13 to 15 points is probably what you're gunning for here. You're probably looking for 2 3-pointers. You're looking for about 3 boards, 3 assists, 1 to 1.5 steals. And then you just hope, he's a good foul shooter, so that's helpful. And then you hope that he doesn't tank you in field goal all too much. I think maybe we got a little carried away when we saw Brunson go down. He's an ad. McBride's an ad, but he's not a game-breaking type. Unless you're streaming for points, in which case, then he actually makes a lot of sense. Here's my very close list. And frankly, there's so much gray area right now that some of these guys might actually make more sense on your rosters. So this is almost like an ads extended board in that I only added 1 or 2 of these guys, but also like my leagues, I might be hunting for different things than you. So these names are Scotty Pippen Jr., Aaron Wiggins, Kyle Filipowski, Aaron Nesmith, Cole Anthony, Moses Moody, and Brandon Clarke. And let's go through and spend 30 seconds on each of them. Scotty Pippen Jr. is interesting because Luke Kennard is dealing with some stuff and was doubtful going into the Sunday game. So we kind of knew that he wasn't going to play in that one. Once a guy gets listed as doubtful, like the day before, there's usually a pretty low probability he's going. Grizzlies are on a back-to-back tonight, so I'd be a little surprised if Kennard was back in this one. He's always banged up, and they're not going to push him right now. Memphis is in perfectly reasonable playoff position, even if they're not playing the best basketball ever. But now that Pippen goes back to being kind of the lone backup point guard, there's a few really interesting things at play here. Number one, he played really well on Sunday, and so he's sort of making a case for himself to be part of whatever they do tonight on Monday with 29 solid minutes. He's a good steals guy. He's a pretty good assists guy. Not a good percentages dude, Pippen, and doesn't hit many 3-pointers, so it's a little bit of a specialist appeal for him, and that's why, in my opinion, he's very close but not a must-add dude. But if Ja Morant also has to sit out a game with his shoulder thing going on, and Memphis has Phoenix on the back-to-back, then they got Utah in a couple of days, like that they might be able to rest a few guys for that ball game. That's where Pippen can really cut loose. So he's close, But I think, again, he makes more sense in specific spots as opposed to everywhere, if that makes sense. And I think that's kind of the case with a lot of these very close dudes. Aaron Wiggins is one that's very close. He's been playing really well. And I'll throw out the game where Oklahoma City rested everybody, which they might do again at some point, and then Wiggins will go big. And lately, Wiggins has been inside the playable zone because he actually has a pretty translatable fantasy game in that he's a high field goal percent guy. He's a decent free throw dude who scores, hits threes, and gets a few rebounds. Because he's generally a positive in the percentages, he doesn't have to do that much elsewhere to be a top 100 guy. He's sitting just outside the top 100 over the last 2 weeks because his free throw number's been not quite as good, but everything else is about where you'd expect. The reason, to me, he's very close is that, again, it is a little specialist-y, and his job isn't secure. If he has not a great ball game, he's just going to play 19 minutes. Because they'll play Alex Caruso more, or they'll play Lou Dort more, or they'll play Cason Wallace more, or they'll play Isaiah Joe more, and the list goes on and on and on with OKC, and that's why he's close. Kyle Filipowski is close because he's very, very, very good in the games that Walker Kessler doesn't play, and he is only serviceable in the games that Kessler does play. He's a good three-point shooter who can rebound, which is kind of a fun little combination. He doesn't get many defensive stats. That's actually why his rank is so high over the last week, is because his steals have been unsustainably high for Filipowski. To me, he still profiles more as an injury fill-in for Kessler, which you can kind of see right out of the chute. Kessler's going to play against Boston. Utah's going to play their varsity squad against the teams where they feel like they're going to lose anyway. And they're going to play their JV team against the clubs where they want to make sure they lose. So looking ahead to Utah, they've got Memphis on Wednesday. I think you probably see the varsity squad for that one. Toronto Friday. That one I actually don't really know. Minnesota, Chicago back-to-back Sunday, Monday. I think you probably see the good players go against Minnesota, and then maybe you see the JV squad against Chicago. And then they got the Clippers, the Celtics, the Cavs, the Grizzlies. Again, Utah's getting set to play some competitive games. I think they'd like to be sort of a semi-spoiler for some of these clubs, and I think you're going to see more games from guys like Kessler and Sexton, and maybe you even see, Markkanen's probably done, but maybe you see Markkanen or John Collins pop up for 1 or 2 games here and there. Jordan Clarkson, similar story. The Jazz are kind of completing a stretch here where they mostly played other tanking teams. It's a little weird, actually. If you go back to week 19, they had Brooklyn, Portland, and Charlotte, which you could argue all 3 of those teams are teams you want to play your JV squad against. Last week, Miami, and then, I got that flip-flop. Utah had Portland, Sacramento, Minnesota, and then the Pels in week 19. Detroit, Washington, Toronto, and Philadelphia this last week. So, again, 2 or 3 of those games they wanted to make sure they lost. Now they suddenly are playing much better teams. I'm sorry, I was looking at the Washington schedule for a minute. Aaron Nesmith is the next one on the board. He's been running hot also, much like Filipowski has, much like a lot of these guys that are on the very near board tend to run hot. Nesmith is a good percentages guy. On the season, he's a 50-90 dude, which is very cool. Last 2 weeks, he's 52-91. And he's been, the numbers are inflated because of no Tyrese Halliburton for a couple of those ball games. But the fact that he's running warm like this, it actually, his stat set is almost the exact same as Aaron Wiggins over these last 2 weeks. Good field goal percent. Free throw for Nesmith has been better. Points, rebounds, assists, steals, blocks, all that stuff is almost the same as Wiggins. So, again, there's a specialist appeal going on there. And we also know that at some point, Nesmith is not going to shoot 52%, and he's not going to score 16 a game. So, to me, that's why he's kind of close, but not a guarantee. Cole Anthony is another guy that now Jalen Suggs we know is out for the year. So Anthony is a guy that in certain formats, you ride him to the finish line. Again, I don't think there's a guarantee that he's good the rest of the way. I don't know that he even keeps up what he's done lately. He's made every free throw he's taken over the last 2 weeks. It's something like 15 or 16 in a row. That's unsustainable. He's at 1.6 blocks over that stretch. That's unsustainable. I think Cole Anthony's probably more of a schedule stream level guy, but also if you, again, we're talking about 5 weeks, if you catch him on a 2-week heater, then over the full 5 weeks, he might end up being a top 100 guy. So you just got to get him on the right day, the right week, whatever that might be, is a little bit hard to tell. But he's had 2 good ones in a row. And does that mean he's on a run, or does that mean he's due for a clunker? Moses Moody is on the very near misses board, and it's possible that he should be higher than this with Brandon Podziemski out, because Moody got 36 minutes in the Warriors' win over the Pistons. He didn't even shoot the ball all that well, and it didn't impact his playing time. 12 points, 7 boards, 3 assists, 3 steals, and 2 3-pointers. Moody, a very good foul shooter over the last couple of weeks. Over the year, he's at 77%. Over the last 2 weeks, he's at 95%, which again feels unsustainable. He'll hit you 3-pointers. He will probably get you a steal. He's going to score 10 to 12 points with 4 rebounds and an assist. And to me, like, looking at this last ball game, you could make the argument that with Podziemski out, Moody's a yes. And with Podziemski back, Moody's more of a schedule level play. And that to me is why he's more in this near miss category, because we don't know how long Podziemski is going to be out. And Brandon Clarke is my last on the near misses board, or the very close board, or whatever you want to call it. I actually had Clarke on my team for a couple of ball games, and I dropped him because I just felt like I wanted to go a different direction and different stats that I was hunting. He's a field goal percent, rebounds, steals, blocks menace right now with Jaren Jackson out. He was due to have a slower ball game after 2 or 3 pretty good ones in a row. Overall, I think because of the categories that Clarke excels at, he's probably going to sit inside the top 100 while Jaren Jackson is out. It's going to come down to whether or not you need field goal percent, boards, steals, and blocks, or he's going to be pretty damn effective. And if you don't, then he's probably not. So again, it's like, what categories are you punting? I like Brandon Clarke. I strongly considered putting him on the ads board. And all of these guys are very much interchangeable pieces based on what your team needs. Here's some guys on the watch list, and you might argue that 1 or 2 of these guys should be on rosters as well. Adem Bona in Philadelphia. This is going to come down to whether or not Andre Drummond or Gershon Yabusele start to sit out ball games, because then Bona would be basically the only center left. Lonnie Walker IV is jacking up shots like they're going out of style in Philly, and I have no idea if that's going to continue, but it's possible that he ends up being the silly season winner of the decade, just taking like 18, 19 shots a game down the stretch. Let's see what happens in the next one, because we still don't know if Tyrese Maxey or Paul George might actually resurface at some point this year. But in the very short term, Walker does look like an interesting points and threes streamer. Jared Butler, same situation basically, but more of an assists guy than a scoring dude in Philly. KJ Martin is interesting if Utah goes full junior varsity at some point down the stretch. His fantasy game has always kind of seemed like it would translate better than it has. KJ Martin is one of those ones where I squint at the numbers and I'm like, why is this dude not able to put up fantasy value? And the free throw percent being kind of crummy is part of it. The steals and blocks not being quite as good as you'd expect being another kind of big part of it. Like, he's so athletic, we just assume that that's going to translate to steals and blocks, and it kind of hasn't for him. So that's why, to me, he's more of a watch list guy. Jose Alvarado is a watch list guy because if you hear anything negative about CJ McCollum, Alvarado, like, you got to just, if you're in the middle of driving somewhere, you need to just like yank your car over to the side of the road. That's how close Jose Alvarado is to being an ad in every format. But until then, he's a McCollum fill-in. And then Noah Clowney's on the watch list because he's back, and I don't know what he's going to ramp up to. And I'm not a big Noah Clowney guy. But right before he got hurt, he started to take a lot of shots, and volume, as ugly as it might have been at times for Clowney, volume does tend to translate to fantasy value. So if he starts taking 10 to 15 shots a game, Clowney probably ends up belonging on some rosters. But right now, I mean, what are you trying to do with him? He's basically just a points and threes streamer because they have 5 games this week. Not games cap. No. Not games cap. And the last page of names, droppable but not must drop. Let me make that very clear. This is droppable. You don't have to drop them, but I'm giving you permission. And before you that, hit the subscribe button, guys. You got to like and subscribe. If you've made it this far in the show, you got to do it. Let's subscribe now. And that way, as we finish up this season, we get some nice wins. And we've got a streaming show coming up later on today. We can be your fantasy basketball source going into draft season next year. We can all win from the starting point. Bol Bol, I think, is droppable. Andre Drummond is droppable. And Donovan Clingan is droppable. And again, I will stress that doesn't mean you have to. It just means you can. It's these things where, the questions are always coming from every direction. Hey, Dan, is it okay if I drop so-and-so? And sometimes I'll say, no, I think I'd probably try to hold on. And that's fine. If you guys want to hold on to these dudes and see what happens over the next game or two, that's fine. I just think you don't have to. Because right now we already talked about it. There's like 1,000 ads and streams and whatever, and like turn different slots on your roster into streaming slots. Your team will be okay. Donovan Clingan, if you need boards and field goal percent and blocks, then you probably don't drop. Andre Drummond, if you need rebounds and some steals, you probably don't drop. But unless you need exactly what they're doing, they're not top 100 guys right now. And I do have one more page I forgot about. Streamers, and it's just a reminder, there are literally 50 to 100 of them floating around in fantasy basketball right now. Subscribe to Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball for our daily schedule analysis show. That's going to be coming in the next 2 hours after this one drops, where I'm going to go through, and you guys have seen the shows. We have one every day so far. We've done one every single day. First 7 days. I'm trying to do 42 consecutive days of schedule analysis shows, so you guys know who to pick up and who to drop on what days. And we're doing a day of and day in advance. And we did one yesterday to kind of get you set for today. But today's show is going to be a weekly preview and a schedule analysis show. So make sure to subscribe to that. And that way you can get all of what we're doing here at Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. Before we go, and I want to see if it works today. I couldn't get it to work on my my desktop PC yesterday. And it had something to do. It said that like I had disabled location services. But I promise you I hadn't do that. And I wonder if it's because I need to do a Chrome update. But whatever the case may be, I'm trying to pull up the tab for our buddies at UnderdogFantasy.com, which is going remarkably well for us here right now. We're up to $116. Started at 100, dropped down to whatever it was, like 80 something, because we were getting our bearings, and now we're back up again. And lately, Underdog's been running a promo every time that Luka Doncic is playing. I don't see one up yet for today, but we do have a pretty nice card of things to look for. So Lakers have a bunch of guys that are questionable, and you can see that's why a lot of the numbers are not posted yet. The Nets, we know a few of their guys are out already, so that's going to be interesting. Cam Thomas is out, so that means there's going to be more. D'Lo is going to want to do some stuff against the Lakers, so give a look to D'Angelo Russell. On the Lakers side, we don't have any other names on the board yet, but I would love to look at like a Jared Vanderbilt prop when we get all those names up there. Utah, I think we're going to see the regulars. So like Walker Kessler would be interesting here. You can't pick these ones until you know who's in and who's out, but I think there's going to be some stuff to look at there. I think you're going to see some Celtics resting this game against a bad Utah team. And this is up and down the board. So we're going to go back through at some point later today, and maybe we'll do it on our streaming show and actually pick some stuff. But for now, come play with us. We're on a winning kick. I mean, I'll throw it up there. You can see we've won our last 3 in a row. We lost this one before that because I guess Nickeil Alexander-Walker didn't get there either. Or did Reeves? Reeves checked out. Oh, they gave that a rescue tab because he left early in the ball game. Nickeil Alexander-Walker was a near miss. This one was refunded. It was a free play. So our last 5 have been refunded, and then this one that got screwed by some weird stuff, and then 3 wins in a row. So it's actually going relatively well. And I'm not trying to sell you that this is like a get-rich-quick scheme or anything. And you can see $9, $15, $11. I'm not doing anything crazy. But it is fun to make, a couple of extra lunch monies a week. Make sure to use our promo code OLDMAN when you sign up, OLDMAN, or just click that link in the show description. And that's how you'll get some fun at UnderdogFantasy.com. Thanks again to Bet Online. Thank you to you for liking, rating, and subscribing. I'm Dan Bespris at Dan Bespris on Twitter. Old Man Squad on Blue Sky. Back again in a couple of hours with our Monday, Tuesday streamer show. Until then, adios.